Geva Theater Center. My name is Pirronne Yousefzadeh. I'm Geva's Associate Artistic Director and Director of Engagement. And I am so excited for this week's Happiness Hour in conversation with Megan here on her new book, There Must Be Happy Endings, on a theater of optimism and honesty. Hey Megan, how are you?
Hey, Pirronne. I'm okay. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here and here.
Where are you zooming in from?
I'm currently in my dining room
Mhm.
in Jamaica Plain, Massachusetts, and I have a very big tree outside my window.
Good. I want to tell our viewers a little bit about you and just want to reiterate how grateful I am that you're here doing this chat with me. For those of you who don't know Megan Sanderg-Zakian, she is a dear friend of mine, and we've actually known each other now for a few years after meeting at the Middle East North America convening at the LARC Play Development Center in New York City. And we were both sort of shocked we didn't already know each other, given that we're both Middle Eastern directors. And then we started up a pretty regular correspondence and communication with two other directors, Evren Ojkin and Kareem Fahmy. And together, the four of us later co-founded Maya Directors, which is a consulting organization for artists and organizations who want to engage with stories from the Middle East and beyond. And in addition to being a fellow co-founder, co-conspirator, Megan is an award-winning freelance theater director who focuses on the development of diverse new plays for the American stage. Her first book, There Must Be Happy Endings, on a theater of optimism and honesty, is available from the Third Thing Press. Megan has previously served as the Associate Artistic Director of Underground Railway Theater in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the Providence Black Repertory Company in Rhode Island, and the 52nd Street Project in New York, and as Director in Residence at the Merrimack Repertory Theater in Lowell, Massachusetts. Megan is a recipient of the Princess Grace Theater Award and the TCG Future Leaders Fellowship, and an alumna of the Lincoln Center Directors Lab, a proud member of the Union for Stage Directors and Choreographers, and she is a graduate of Brown University and holds an MFA in Interdisciplinary Arts from Goddard College. So Megan I know you had a number of in-person book events planned before the coronavirus turned all of our plans upside down. And so I'm just so glad that we can do this and spread the gospel of your book, which I just love so much. I'm going to shower you with a little bit of praise to start, if that's okay. I just wanted to start by saying how struck I was by how personal the book is and how vulnerable it is. And it made me think of, I went back to a book I think we both know and love, Anne Bogart's A Director Prepares. And it made me think about her chapter on embarrassment.
Yes.
And I love this little section here. To avoid embarrassment is a natural human tendency. Feeling truly exposed to others is rarely a comforting sensation. But if what you do or make does not embarrass you sufficiently, then it is probably not personal or intimate enough. Which I found to be such a difficult thing to reckon with as a director, and I continue to. But it was something that I thought your book so beautifully manifested, which is that in risking embarrassment, in what's personal and vulnerable, you're able to reveal an inner truth, both for yourself and also for the reader. So I wanted to just say thank you for that, for risking of yourself in that way, because it makes your book such a gift to all of us who read it.
Thank you for saying that. I'm glad you didn't ask me if I felt sufficiently embarrassed by my book, which I do. So, um, yeah, I definitely think that's one of the probably the most significant difference between directing a play and writing a book so far that I've experienced is how much more vulnerable and personal and potentially embarrassing it is.
Mm.
And it's not only because it's personal, it's because it's like permanent. So
Mhm.
it's like continually potentially embarrassing forever.
No pressure, right?
Yeah, it will always be there to embarrass me.
So I I love that. I love that in the book you're examining your affinity for happy endings, and of course this is Happiness Hour. And so I have to ask you before we start digging into some passages, what your Happiness Hour beverage of choice is right now.
Well, in this moment, my happiness hour beverage of choice is turmeric ginger tea, which I
Mm,
have put into a mug that was a gift from a playwright, which is a handleless mug to keep your hand warm while you're drinking the tea.
nice.
Cheers.
Anti-inflammatories also make me happy, so I get that. I get that.
What is your
I'm
beverage?
I'm drinking a blackberry sparkling water.
Oh.
I thought I would go for something crisp and refreshing, much like your perspective on theater making. But for our viewers out there who might be interested in something with a little alcohol involved or something with a couple ingredients, perhaps. Scott Folkowski, a Geva Theater Center fave, dear friend, has a couple options for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Hello there, Scott Belkowski, Jeeva's Guest Services Manager, once again bringing you this week's social distance cocktail demonstration from my dining room. This week's cocktail is a simple mix of unique flavors blended together in hopes of helping you and your loved ones find your happy ending. What you'll need to achieve your happy ending is ice, club soda, cranberry juice, an orange, a lime, and Black Button vodka. We'd like to do another special shout out to Jason and his team over at Black Button for the amazing work that they continue to do during this pandemic. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, Black Button. All right, what we're going to want to do is take some of that ice and put it in a shaker. If you don't have a shaker, that's not a problem. You can just simply mix this up right in your glass. A couple pieces of ice, and then we're going to take 4 ounces of some club soda. Pour that in. We're going to add in 2 ounces of Black Button vodka. Beautiful. To that, we're going to take an orange. Today I'm using a clementine. So I'm going to squeeze the juice of 1 full clementine in there. Depending on the size of your clementines, you might want to use 1 or 2. You can also, if you're using an orange, you can use a full orange or half an orange, just depending on how orange the flavor you want that. You can also use an orange flavored vodka. That'd be great as well. To that, we're going to add just a splash of cranberry juice. And we're just going to simply stir that together. And then I'm going to strain that out into my fancy martini glass. Today I'm using a martini glass, but you can use any glass that you have. If you have a highball or a tumbler, feel free to use that. But today I'm using a martini glass, and I'm just going to squeeze a little bit of lemon juice in there, and then garnish with that, and you can enjoy. Now you can also convert this very easily to a non-alcoholic drink. You'll start out the same way with 4 ounces of your club soda. To that, you're going to substitute the vodka for any clear soda that you have. Today I'm using 7-Up, but you're more than welcome to use a flavor of your choice. If you like ginger ale or you like Sprite, feel free to use that. And again, we're going to take the juice of an orange, squeeze that directly in there. Beautiful. Well, that's looking good. Do a splash of cranberry juice. And then the juice of a lime. A little bit of ice, put that on the rocks if you'd like. Gently mix that up. And you're and ready to enjoy. Here's to hoping you and your loved ones' happy endings come true. Cheers.
Well, I know what I'm making for my next happy hour. I don't know about you.
Yeah, it is all news to me that there's a cocktail that matches my book. So I'm certainly planning on making it.
The question I think at the heart that I um, think is so apt for this particular moment is if it's possible or even ethical to make hopeful art in an unjust and chaotic world. And I was hoping you might be able to read a little bit to kick us off from the book, from your introduction, to set the stage for us a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I start out the book talking about my strong affinity for happy endings as a child, including writing books, with happy endings in elementary school. I was really into everything turning out well. I'll read the part of the introduction that picks up a little later in life, following my elementary school novel writing career. When I graduated from college, I moved to New York City and registered to vote at my new address on Hudson Street. On election day, my neighborhood polling place couldn't find my name, so I rode my teal blue Schwinn down to the Board of Elections on Varick Street. I was filling out forms in a lobby on the 17th floor when a jetliner dropped out of a perfect azure sky and flew into a building 20 blocks south. A man next to me kept repeating, "My nephew works in there. He works on the 90th floor." We were close enough to make out dark forms leaping from the upper floors of the building. As I pedaled back up Hudson towards my apartment, I saw hundreds of people lining the streets convulse in unison, crying out. I realized later that must have been the moment when the first tower fell. I watched the second tower collapse from the roof of my building. It felt like the end. I was altered by that encounter with the world's violent unpredictability, which I'd previously understood only in the abstract. Before that day, I saw tragedy, violence, hate as blemishes in an essentially compassionate universe, as aberrations that must be resisted, fought against, and overcome for the sake of our beautiful world. After, I saw them as pervasive. I saw the fundamental chaos in the lives of the 9-year-olds in my playwriting class who were often at the mercy of brutal public systems. I heard it in the sobs of my roommate through the wall at night, and in the voices of Baghdadi teenagers that came over the radio in the months and years after my country invaded theirs. I looked into the faces of strangers on the street and recognized my own devastation. Now I understood that this was the world, unjust, irrational, cruel. But September 11th was not the end, at least not for me. Both before and after that day, I made theater. I still make theater. Sometimes, often, it seems like a deeply inadequate response to a world of terror and chaos. But I strive to meet that world with my full and honest attention. In the collision between that striving and the whisper of my childhood longing, please let everything work out, I find myself again considering happy endings. What can a happy ending offer us? And now I mean an honestly happy ending, not a dishonest one. Not one that papers over reality with false cheer, but one that earns its happiness with full truth, with clear-eyed presence. That acknowledges the irrationality of the human heart, the infinite, unavoidable harms to self and others, the violence of the systems we've made to support us, but that fall so short, the maddening complexity of things that should be clear. Is this kind of happy ending even possible? One that gives us a compassionate space where grief and loss can coexist with hope and joy? One that offers us an alleviation, a space of relief where the weight of the world's terror abates momentarily. Perhaps it could act as a restorative, a tonic that refreshes and rebalances. And then, too, it would need to open up space to rejoice, to be washed with pure delight, wouldn't it? In a world where everything changes, in an ever-expanding universe, can a container the size of a theater and the shape of 2 hours be big enough to hold all this? I still wonder, how do I reconcile my desire for hope and possibility, connection and transformation, with an authentic witnessing of darkness and despair, hate and violence? In the face of an enormously unjust and chaotic history and present, is it acceptable? Is it ethical to believe in the happy ending? Is it possible to be both honest and hopeful? Although I write from the viewpoint of someone making theater, I believe that this balancing act is one that all sensitive human beings must at some point attend to. It is the essential question of how to, as Walter Lippmann wrote, live forward in the midst of complexity.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking me to read it.
So I want to ask to start where the book came from, the journey to write it, and how you knew it was time to write it, to document something about this ephemeral thing that we do.
As I mentioned, I've always been interested in writing books from about age 6 or 7 onwards. My dad's a playwright, so my mom's she's a molecular biologist, but she's also quite a creative person, and she likes to remind me of that, and that she also writes a lot, although it's a different kind of writing. Mm-hmm. So I've always been interested in documenting things. I love writing director's notes. I don't know if that's weird. Is that weird?
You may be the first director who I've ever heard say that.
Okay.
I do not feel that way, but so tell me more of your love so that I might infect me with it.
Well, I like writing more than I like talking, I think. I really I've always been interested in writing things down. I like to think things through really thoroughly before putting them out into the world. I actually struggle with the ephemeral nature of the theater. I like to have I just can't tell you how much I love this object. I just love that it exists, you know? I have to I don't know if I want to put this on the internet, but I guess I'm about to. The first night that these books came, I actually slept with several of them like next to my pillow. Because I was just like so happy about the object, you know, and a play isn't like that. Like you can't like hold it and like put it under your pillow, and you know, so I think there's always been something in me that's really wanted to write things down, and to write a book in particular. I actually have these essays have been around for a while, and I've been encouraged to publish them in you know, like in journals or magazines, and they always wanted to be a book. I never wanted to separate them. But I've been working on them. I started working on them in graduate school, and they were part of my graduate thesis. So it was like 10 years ago that I started writing them, and it's part of the experience of reading the book. I think is my experience of writing them over 10 years, and sort of revisiting them and wrestling with them, and negotiating with where I feel like they're still true or not true. But it was funny. One of the things that I discovered along the way, since I've been working on it for a while, is that there were a couple of moments, like first when I was in grad school, and then a couple of years later when I really thought about turning them into a book. So I was talking about them, and they've always had this title. It's taken from the Brecht play, Good Person of Szechuan, which I love. And at that point, 10 years ago, and then whatever it was, 3 or 4 years after that, when I was talking about the book again, people said, oh my gosh, this is the perfect book for right now. Like, we so need this, you know? And people have been saying that to me again now, as the book actually has been published. And my theory is that this is a part of the human condition. I mean, we might feel, I guess we do feel at all moments like there is a particular darkness that we're contending with. which is very real. And the conversation and the questions feel really necessary and have felt really necessary. And I think that I became really ready to actually put the book into the world um, when I had done a sufficient amount of work. I say that it's hard to form that sentence because, of course, we never feel like we've done a sufficient amount of work.
Mm-hmm.
But I had done enough work to have an honest encounter with some of the dark spaces in myself, which I hadn't when I started writing it. And there's still, I mean, I know that 10 years from now, speaking of embarrassment, I'm going to be like, oh my God, there's so much more to excavate. Because it's always part of, it's part of the journey. But I think that all of us have that. Um, there's that internal territory, and there are the things that are harder to travel, and for me it's the darkness. For other people it's the light. It's harder to travel to the light internally.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was really when I had some further access to that, I felt like I could write it. And then the sort of like really granular answer is that um, I received an opportunity. I mean, it's not writing a book it's not easy, but you could hypothetically do it sitting at your dining room table. But I don't think that I could have by myself. And I had an amazing, beloved friend and editor and the founder of the Third Thing Press, Anne DeMarkin, who said, I want to publish you. I believe the world needs this book. It's a necessary alternative to what we have out there in the world right now. And uh, this is something I care enough about to midwife. And she did that, and part of the gift of her holding of my experience of writing was actually allowing me to see myself in terms of what she did felt so dramaturgical. It felt like oh my gosh, I can think of like the time when I was with the playwright who gave me this mug, and I did for her exactly what Anne was doing for me. And so also the reflecting back of like what it means to hold space for someone to put something into the world that is very, very deeply of them, that they wouldn't be able to make without support, felt like a coming home to me too. It felt like something that I know that I believe in, that I've spent my professional career doing, and to work with someone else who believed in that and was interested in holding me in that way was completely transformative. And I recommend that everyone check out the Third Thing Press and the other authors that have been published in this cohort. They're all amazing, and the press is extraordinary, especially in a moment like this when we do need these necessary alternatives to the ideas that have been around for a while.
Yeah. It's so interesting that you talk about her being a midwife to the book, and her sort of holding space for you in the way you have for a playwright, because even before you had gotten to that point, when you said the word midwife, I was like, it made me think of the number of times, which I probably can't even count, that someone has referred to a director as being the midwife to the play. And the difference in taking this role in the collaborative process versus the role that you're typically in as a director working with a playwright as they're trying to set things down on the page. And there's another kind of duality that I'm interested in the book, in the way that you it is so clearly written by a director to me, because of the number of ways in which I feel like you're taking care of and aware of the audience, the reader, throughout the book. even in a kind of immersive, sort of the equivalent of a kind of immersive theater experience, where at one point in the book you asked me to put on, I believe it's a song from Hedwig, right?
I
Uh,
think it's a song from Little Shop.
Little Shop.
Yeah.
Uh, um, and yeah, and just sort of the like that kind of relationship slash tension, I would say, even between, again, like this thing that we do in a room for an audience that is ephemeral, that goes away, this thing that's set down on the page that exists forever, but also at the same time the reader's relationship to that, which is ephemeral. Like, I will never read your book for the first time again. I will read it again, but I will know what's coming, in some ways, and I will discover different things about that. And I guess I'm curious about like um, how you deal with theater's ephemerality, and how you, because it isn't something you can tuck in with you in bed to make you happy, um, as well as how you articulate experiences you had in the theater, which are now, which are memories of experiences that the reader may or may not have also had. Um, can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. I
I
mean,
just
it's
asked you a lot, didn't I?
no, no, I mean, yes, but my taking in of it wasn't a response to feeling overwhelmed by your question. It was taking in the embodied sense that I have right now of how ephemeral theater is. The really um, like, will there be theater again in the history of humanity? Yes. Will there be theater again the way that I've known it in my lifetime? Probably. Will there be theater again the way that I've known it in my lifetime in the next 5, 10 years? I don't know. Um,
Mm-hmm.
do I want there to be? I don't know. And so, and everything feels so ephemeral right now, and one of the things that I feel like I've gotten really in touch with in this moment of quarantine is that um, ephemerality itself is very hopeful. Um, the idea that things can pass away is 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 incendiary. We spend so much time thinking about, or not even thinking maybe, but living in a space of feeling that things are immovable, that we're stuck in a particular status quo, or that it's this way because it has to be this way because it's always been this way. I mean, things are just, things that have always been this way are melting away, are overnight. Things that have always been away are no longer away, you know? Um, and of course, things that have always been away are even more that way, and even more terrible. Some of them. So I don't mean that everything has just melted and turned into something else, but some things have turned into something else that is more awful. um, but I do think that the concept of ephemerality is actually a profoundly hopeful concept, and the thing that is gets in the way of our experience of that is fear. We get terrified of things changing. We get terrified of loss. We get terrified, I think, of our we get I get terrified of the size of grief. I get terrified, oh my god, I will have to grieve this, and to grieve it might kill me. Like, I would rather live with a thing that doesn't that is kind of like baseline slightly painful than be forced to grieve something
Mm-hmm.
so large that I don't know that I will survive the grief and the loss of it. So I feel like I'm in like a really a really big psychological cosmic space right now that's not necessarily about theater making, but I guess that's the place that I'm in related to that question. Like the I have come to very much cherish the ephemerality of what we do, and the fact that it has passed away makes it feel even more sort of precious and lovely. That actually, and you know, Anne Bogart talks about like the greatest gift you can give to another human being is your attention, and the job of the director is just to pay attention, just to be present. And really, if theater, making theater and viewing theater is just sort of an exercise in presence, like it's just about um, being there and paying attention. And that isn't ephemeral, you know, like that continues to be our task, is to be here and to pay attention. That hasn't gone away. And that doesn't go away. So you're asking about like writing about productions um, that have passed or that people might not have seen. I think that the sort of the practice of making the things that we are practicing for by making art and by viewing art are the same regardless of the production and regardless of whether we're making art or like gardening or you know, welding something or whatever.
There's so many threads I could pick from here, from what you've just said, to keep our chat to go forward here. But there's something about what you said about how about what stays with us. And I think that one of the things that stays with us is our processes, and the way we are changed by them. And there's a really fantastic passage. Would you mind reading? It's in my personal favorite chapter, although it's hard to decide. A lamp, a bridge, a ship.
Every time I'm humbled by the number of people who work together to make a play. I want to guide them with kindness and grace. I want to speak to the work ahead with clarity and energy. I want to move with the conviction that this story matters, to ensure that everyone in the room feels welcomed and inspired and part of something. I know that the tone of my voice or the tilt of my head has the power to shift everyone's energy, for better or for worse. It's just a play, of course, but almost every time it happens. The play is about the end of a marriage. One of the actors is in the process of ending their marriage. The play is about an abused woman trying to escape her marriage and save her child. One of the actors has the same story in their family. Their mother was that mother and ran to save them. The play is about the aftermath of a suicide. Any number of the actors have recently lost someone in that way. The play includes a miscarriage. One of the actors has recently had a miscarriage, although she won't speak about it in the rehearsal room. Only I know. So from first rehearsal to opening night, I need to be able to hold the space for this work to be catharsis and healing, for it to be both craft and truth, for it to go far enough but not too far. I have to breathe into a deep place of compassion, of complete attention, and also hold the frame. They are relying on me for this. Without the frame of task, in the next 2 hours, we have to perfect this card-playing sequence in the second act. Skeleton crew. We would spiral into the raw space of unbounded feeling. The structure of task makes the work possible. The compassionate container keeps it safe. It's a tender kind of intuition that tells me when to stop the rehearsal and gather in a cross-legged circle on the floor. Equally tender is the instinct for when I must push us forward. Sometimes the circle has opened up some space for exploration. Doing the scene again afterwards will be breathtaking. Sometimes the circle has exposed something raw and tender, something that needs time to gestate. The right thing to do is to move on to a different scene, or even end the rehearsal. Early in my career, I used to consult the room in moments like this. What do you want me to do now? Occasionally I still do, but I've come to understand that part of my job is to know more than they do about what will be best for the group in these moments. In fact, moving with the confidence that I know how to take care of the group, that I can keep them safe, that I am closely listening and watching is essential. If doubt creeps into the room about whether or not I can firmly hold this container, then suddenly the work becomes much harder and more dangerous for all of us. Swiggle.
Wiggle. Do you feel so you talk a little bit about how early in your career you would defer to the room a little bit, and I used to do this too. And I think that there are so many ways in which, and Anne talks about this too, I feel like there's so many ways in which we want to be like perfectly 50-50 between two opposing forces within us, right? Horizontal and vertical, compassionate and rigorous, being able to lead but also being able to listen. But so in this gradual sort of evolution towards trusting that intuition and not deferring to the room every time as to how to proceed. Can you talk a bit about how that happened and how you sensed that you were sort of on that side of the spectrum in a way that you needed to bring more into the middle?
It's really interesting, and I'd be interested to hear what your journey was on that too. I mean, I think as a director, I I was lucky that I came into an experience of theater making. I was my undergraduate education was at Brown University, and it was very much a space at the time of like devising and abstraction, and it just felt like there were no rules and everything. And I mean, I think back on some of the things that I had actors do, and I'm like, oh my god, like it's amazing that nobody actually got hurt. But there was a lot of there's a lot of sense of the creative space in the room of making something together, highly collaborative, um, and uh, and I never did graduate education in directing. I never had formal training in directing. I never assisted actually, really, which just seems crazy to me. Kind of wish that I had. But so there was always a kind of spaciousness. Like uh, I never felt the kind of bar, like the pressure of like, to be a director you must take charge of the room and you must have a vision and you must be blah blah blah. Like I think my idea of good directing was like create an open space for everyone to play in.
Mm.
And I'm glad about that. And as I got, as I aged, um,
As we do.
as we do, very little, of course, but um, uh, I was able to give myself the grace of being a little more critical about when I was uh, holding that value about open space and collaboration, because it really had meaning, and what felt was important to the act of creation. And when I was holding that value, as because I was avoiding my own authority,
Mm.
um, when was I scared to take charge? When was I um, ducking the responsibility to have a vision for something? Um, when was I missing the opportunity to answer a question directly instead of opening it up to the room?
Mm.
When was the room missing out on hearing my vision because I felt it was so important to hear everyone else's voice, And uh, it's all caught up in gender and race and sexuality and opportunity and all of these other things. And speaking of not having gone to grad school, like my anxiety about like not being a super trained director and what that meant, and maybe I wasn't smart enough, and you know uh and so and I've never felt like a director. Like one of the reasons I really admire you as a director, Pirronne, is that you always seem to have like just such interesting aesthetic ideas. And I feel like it's never felt like an easy space for me, like concept, or I don't know. I come from this like just much more sort of like, oh, I feel things about this play, which isn't to say that isn't a fine starting place to develop a vision or to develop a concept, but it's felt like more treacherous terrain for me, and so the question of like, when do I need to challenge myself to step more into that terrain, um, because of because it's a because that's just an area of growth that I need to push into. And when am I actually avoiding doing something that I easily could do or want to do because of what I've been told that I shouldn't do, because I'm not like a straight white man, and that dance has felt really complex, and I don't know, there was something that happened sort of like crossing over through my mid 30s. I felt like I suddenly ended up in a more, it just feels less fraught to me now, which is really nice. But part of the reason I wrote the book was that I longed for a more nuanced discussion of how to hold the authority of the room, as a woman, of color, as a queer woman, and it was a book that I never, that I never had. It was a set of ideas that I never had. It took me a long time to figure that out. And also, my wife is a psychologist, and she studies leadership and authority, as her, like, that's her job. And so I also think I have to credit, that probably, what I just talked about, like passing through this certain point of age, probably also coincided with meeting her, over the last, whatever, probably 10 years since I started writing the book, and knowing her, and having someone pull back the curtain on the mechanics of leadership and authority for me a little bit, which I highly recommend to people who are leading things, because it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Oh God, you just brought up so many interesting things. And one of those was about, and I'm just going to extract one thread, but about the intersection of race and power, and thinking about that in relationship to like how you were conditioned, which I certainly identify with. I think as a younger Middle Eastern female director, I sort of approached older male actors the way I would approach like my uncles, where I would be like, would you like some tea and to also maybe do the scene? And having to, and realizing how much in that I was ducking my own responsibility, and assuming that that's what they wanted. And I think some of them did. I think some of them did want that sort of submissiveness. But to sort of look at that from a different angle, you talk in the book about Bart Shear's production of Joe Turner's Come and Gone, the August Wilson play, a play you love, a playwright you love, and you talk a bit about him directing that as a white man, and with a predominantly white creative team, but without sort of focusing on that from a any sort of ethics standpoint. There is, I think, a really incredible passage in the book about and a very compassionate criticism of the production. One that I think pretty bravely, you include in this book, that is, not ephemeral. It will always be here. And Bart, if you're watching, maybe pick up a copy. I think Megan has some good things to say. We can maybe edit that part out.
No, I mean, I do, I do want, I would love for Bart Sher to read the essay because I feel like one of the reasons that I wrestled so deeply with the production is how much I respect him as a director and how
Uh-huh.
much I loved. I mean, I loved The Light in the Piazza, which I had just moved to New York and I had seen it right before, Joe Turner, and it was like I think I saw it two or three times. I mean, so and he's brilliant. I mean, he's a brilliant director, and he's a brilliant man. I mean, yeah, it would definitely be a dream of mine to like talk about the play and the essay with him,
Yeah.
because I know he's thought about it too since then.
Mm-hmm. Um,
But what were you gonna say? You were gonna say something about.
well, I was curious to hear you um, read a bit from this chapter. This is from Unstable Ground. It's after the squiggle on page 93. Um,
Oh yes.
as it sort of sets the stage for uh, not only in response to Joe Turner, but also in response to some of your own work.
Yes. Yeah. So the production of Joe Turner. The famous last line of the play is one of the characters says to sort of the central character, Harold Loomis, you shine in like new money. And at the end of Bart Sher's production, there was a shower of gold glitter at that moment, which I had a really hard time with as a design choice. And the essay is wrestling with gold glitter, basically. So this is towards the end of the essay. When I returned to these essays to revise them for publication in this book, I started with this.
Writing.
I was relieved to find that my analysis of Sher's glittery sheen on Wilson's ending felt as true as when I wrote it. Joe Turner has a happy ending. Harold Loomis is reunited with his wife and his song. In the same moment, this reunion gives him what he's been searching for and sends him running, shining with blood, away from everything he's ever known and loved into an uncertain future. The final image is glorious, ecstatic. To throw gold glitter on something so multivalent diminishes its power and fails to imagine what we really need as a nation to heal, to hope. I knew this 10 years ago when I saw the production and began writing about it, and I know it now. Then something interesting happened. I kept reading. The other essays in the book were also full of interesting, complex ideas. And inevitably, in the final paragraph of each one, sometimes in the final sentence, I tied things up neatly. A cheerfully poetic summation, a calming turn of phrase, a reassurance, a smile. I had started the book by railing against gold glitter, and then had thrown gold glitter all over it. And as we in the theater know so well, glitter sticks. You can scrub your hands, even take a shower, and you'll still find it sparkling on your pillow in the morning. Should I stop there? Or do you want me to keep going?
Keep going.
This was a distressing realization. And then how terrifying to publish a book. A book is not like live theater. It lives long past the final curtain, locking me forever into the imperfect gesture of this moment. I am not alone, of course. It is remarkable how often a human being advocating against a thing will actually perform or encourage that very thing in the course of their advocacy. It's common to hear people with passionately held beliefs about the sacredness of life advocate for policies that would cause harm to many living beings. Public discourse about making the world safer often employs language and strategies that feel violent. And the aesthetic of a play's production can vigorously resist the ideas and values at the heart of that play. I promise I will not do this in every essay, describe what it used to be about and what it's about now. But it feels important to this one because of how thoroughly I undermined my own project. I set out to trouble the notion of happy endings, to interrogate them, and in doing so, insistently replicated their most perilous potential. I found that the work I had to do in my process of revision was precisely the work I wished Cher had done, the work of the blues, forging the only honest kind of happy ending out of a cacophonous embrace of pain and beauty, blood and dirt and light.
There's a relationship here that I think is so fascinating between criticism and this idea of troubling the happy ending, which I think is about complicating the binary, right? Of like the play is good, or like the ending is good or bad, the character is good or bad, but criticism also, right? I think traditionally can fall into that. The production was good or bad, and here's why.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in what you exemplify here, both this incredible respect for Bart Scher and also the admission in the book about how much you loved Light in the Piazza, right? As well as a thoughtful analysis about why the end of Joe Turner troubled you, and that both of those truths can coexist. And I guess I'm curious to hear you talk about how you view theater criticism and what you wish for it in outside of course how much as artists we benefit from good reviews, right? Career wise, but I think philosophically you're after something else.
Yeah. It's so funny. I realized as you were talking that I actually had an essay in the book about criticism that didn't make it in. Well, part of it turned into the essay I was previously reading from, A Lamp, a Bridge, a Ship, which is about, hey, Ruth.
Yes.
Hi.
Set her down. She's very high. Of course, today's the day. Usually she's not.
I'm happy for her to participate. Yeah, so there was an essay, and it became the one that I was reading from before about the rehearsal process and taking care of people in the rehearsal process. But it started out being about ethics and aesthetics, and capital G good and little g good. So sort of like ethically good and artistically good, and what the relationship is between these two things. And I could not wrangle this essay, so maybe there's going to be something that I write about criticism in a future book. But the writing that I did do about criticism actually like brought me to tears at times, because I was thinking about how much I love criticism in a broad sense. Like, I love that people engage with our work, like I love that I love people writing about theater. Like, I love everyone's Facebook post. I love Ruth wanting to engage with it. I mean, I love I love the conversations in the lobby. I love all of it, and reviews in the newspaper or on the TV or the radio, people talking about our work. I just find it really thrilling. Like, I find it thrilling that I made something and then people talk about it. And I find it thrilling to see something that someone else made and then be able to talk about it with other people, whether through reading a review or talking on social media. I think it's a really fun part of what we do. And it's actually one of the things that I'm finding so much fun right now in the, after having written the book, to getting to do this, is just really, it's fun being in a dialogue and getting to read the reviews of the book and stuff. So I love that there's a conversation, and I long for the conversation to be as spacious as it possibly can be. I think, one of the things that I realized when I was writing is that it takes a long time to develop a nuanced like articulation of something, and I had 10 years to do that. And if I had written if I had written about Joe Turner right after I saw it, it would just not have been, I wouldn't have had that much, I think, that was that useful to say. Um,
Mm.
although a lot of people did say,
Scene stealer.
a lot of people did say a lot of really um, useful things in that moment. And one of the things that actually, I mean, one of the most beautiful uses of criticism I thought was Kurt Anderson of Studio 360, who did this like really beautiful radio piece on it, where he pointed out that part of what was at play was like the historical record of Lincoln Center and their and the directors that they had hired, and he was talking particularly about directors of color, and it also turns out that in terms of directors who are women, they just had a they were hiring pretty much exclusively white male directors. I believe the last time before Joe Turner, the production of Joe Turner, the last time they'd hired a director of color was like 17 years or something before that. So like to do Joe Turner with Bart Sher at the helm is one thing. To do it when you haven't had a black director work on anything on your stage in 2 decades, I think is different. So those kinds of functions of criticism where they're like putting things into context and ferreting out information and maybe like widening the conversation, I love and I'm really excited by, and I want to be able to, I want to have criticism where two things, like you said, can be true at the same time, I have my favorite, I don't think I say this in the book, but like I have this on my wall, one of my favorite pairs of questions to ask. I got this from Krista Tippett actually on Being. There's a guest of hers that said this, and it's stuck in my head for years now. What in your own position troubles you?
Mm.
What in the other position do you find attractive?
Mm.
And that everything,
Mm.
as you write about things, you always consider these two, especially when it's opinion.
Yeah.
What in your own position troubles you? What in the other position do you find attractive? Because there's always something true in both of those questions. And until you've considered them, I think it's hard to have nuance.
Yeah, and there's something, I mean, related to this in how you talk about your process with working on the ending of Harriet Jacobs, and a realization that you were perhaps sanitizing the ending, but as well, throughout the book, your relationship to race, and the persistent questions from your wife, Candace, about the African and African American work that you had found yourself doing quite a lot of in your career. And there's a way in which you're holding yourself accountable in this book to and accountable to your reader. I think in sharing that, right? So that the thing you identify in Joe Turner is also the thing you identified in your own work. And I'm curious, I guess, to hear you talk about how you navigated writing about race, but also how we as directors in your mind navigate accountability, right? Because we're in a room constantly asking of other people to risk of themselves, to share and show their most vulnerable and darkest parts of their humanity, and how we model that also in how we hold ourselves accountable. And particularly in 2020 in relationship to race, and that is not something that is relegated only to the white male directors, but to all of us, to everyone, to be responsible to the discourse that we perpetuate.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I mean, those questions about like what in my own position troubles me, what in the other position do I find attractive, I think are really helpful. But like, I mean, the the fact that we are all implicated. We are living with the results of what we have all created, and we are all affected by it. We are all equally affected by it, and we all are all equally implicated in it. Um, I believe that very strongly, and I try to lead with that in the rehearsal room. And again, I actually have to say, I've been so deeply affected by being married to a psychologist who thinks systemically. Candace's, as I mentioned before, she studies leadership and authority, but particularly the dynamics of groups, and and what I feel like I have really internalized from listening to her and absorbing her work and absorbing her conversations with her colleagues over the years is like this, the the psychological and the human um, reality of the sort of like intellectual systemic stuff that we talk about. Like we talk about systemic racism, we talk about white supremacy, we talk about misogyny and sexism and all of these patriarchy and these big intellectual systemic concepts. And in each room, like in the microcosm of each rehearsal room, we all are constantly responsible for recreating those things. Like we bring them with us and we replicate them.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter who we are. I mean, of course, it matters who we are. And we are also equally vulnerable, but in different ways, to replicating uh, systemic dynamics. So, it's really the I highly recommend, actually, once we're allowed to be in the world again, um the work that Candace does. One of the things that she does is that was like impacted me so intensely is this thing called a group relations conference.
Mm-hmm.
um I think the title is something like CSGSS, or the website is like csgss.org or something. But it's just the being able to really see uh, the the matrix of how those dynamics work help me to not take it as personally. And I think in the rehearsal room, once you're able to not take things personally, um, there's a lot of transformation. So yeah, I mean, like I expect in the rehearsal room to um, both to be very alert to how racism and sexism and transphobia and xenophobia and everything else is operating. And I expect to be totally blind to any number of other things or any number of aspects of those things. And I live in a space of faith that I've created enough room in the room for someone to have access to being able to name what's happening and to uh, speak it so that we can address it, so that we can keep doing the work in a way that isn't harmful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think that this is like, I feel like when we start talking about this stuff, it can feel like, oh, we're, this is this PC thing where we all have to like be careful about what pronouns we're using and everyone gets really cranky or something. And I mean, I appreciate that, that's a perspective that someone could have. And I also want to say, from an artistic standpoint, that I think the real ask is to see more, is to like pay attention to more, is to notice more. And that always makes us better artists, like, because with the thing that's ultimately the criticism is like, there's all this shit we haven't been paying attention to, and we're not noticing it, we're not allowing it in to the art that we're making. So Yeah, like I think the like if I can notice something that I haven't seen or some blinder that I've had on or some way that I've been harmful or some I don't know, it means I get to be a better artist if I can
Yeah.
notice that. Not that I can ever fix it, that there's no it's not about necessarily fixing it or changing it, but just noticing things. The more you can, it's like I feel like it's like this ever expanding like wide angle lens, being a director, like the wider you can push it,
Yeah.
the better you're gonna be.
Right. Right. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because it comes back to something you brought up really early in our chat, which was about attention, about giving your attention, and that there's a version of how we think about the spaces that we create and the inclusive nature that we aspire to being a space of deeper attention. um, oh, just that, like that idea that being attentive to someone is like the most truly present as a human, as a director, is like the most one of the most loving things we can do, because what do we want more than to feel like another person is saying to us, I see you, I deeply see you.
Yeah. Yeah, and also ourselves. Like I think like if you're like I don't want to miss the opportunity to notice, oh, that's interesting thing about me that I have misgendered that person twice
Mm,
a week.
mm-hmm.
What what's going on there? I mean, and I think it's just there's a lot of there's just a lot of noticing in ourselves that we avoid because it's uncomfortable and scary. But that I mean, and I avoid plenty of it too. But I find when I'm able to actually notice, like here's a really vexing example that's happening right now that I'm not happy about, is that I am having trouble. Like I'm starting to notice, and I'm having trouble noticing, and I'm really trying to stick with noticing my resistance to precision in baking. I I'm so, Pirronne, I'm so serious, and like I my bread is I'm trust me that this is a directing metaphor, but like my bread just consistently is like not fully done in the middle, and I know I could be a better baker if I could figure out what's going on. Like why don't I want to put the things on the kitchen scale and like fully measure each thing, and like why should I there's just something I can feel, there's something going on with me, and what is it, and the reason to excavate it is not necessarily like because you go to therapy and you become a better person. Like I don't actually care that much about becoming a better person. I want the bread to be better, you know. I want the bread to be better, and I want the art to be better, and you have to look at why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing it. I mean, that's the only way it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
So check back with me at some future point to see if I have looked deeply enough at my own measuring capacities to bake some bread that gets cooked all the way through.
Oh gosh, I can't believe we didn't get to talking about Hedwig structure. We didn't get to talking about your incredible analysis of The Dark Knight, which has also inspired me to rewatch that trilogy uh,
Oh,
during lockdown. Your love of musical theater, which I was delighted to learn about in reading the book. So there's just so much. There's so much more that we could discuss, but um, I do want to ask you one sort of last question, which is on the other side of this crisis, what is the authentic happy ending you envision and hope for?
hmm. Um, I think I hope that we don't wait to the other side of the crisis for the happy ending.
Mm.
I hope that we're able to um, breathe into the many, many um, beautiful and extraordinarily hopeful things that are happening right now. I hope that we're able to notice the ways that things are changing, even in the midst of what seems like so much stasis. I hope that we don't feel like we need to say, well, that's over, and box up this experience and put it away, but that we can carry something from this, particularly from the things that were hard about it with us. I hope that there's that the experience that we're having right now of for many of us who are predominantly at home, and which is my experience, has been my experience during this time, that the zooming in of the frame. I'm not a film person. Whatever this is, yeah, the smallifying of the of the frame reminds us that scale is just scale, but everything exists in every frame.
Mm.
I think that that what I ultimately ended up feeling like at the end of the book was a sense that happy endings weren't about what event happens in the end, but more about the sort of extraordinary possibility in our reach into the void, as artists, as storytellers, as human beings, of people watching. You know, there will be people that listen to this and watch this, and it moves. It's deeply moving to me that we are making something right now and having the faith that it will be received. I mean, I think that's just sort of every time it happens, it's extraordinary, you know, and so I don't think that's any different right now than it will be 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years from now. That's my hope.
Can I ask you to read one little bit?
Yeah, sure.
That was beautiful, and you reminded me of the last, in the last few pages, each act of writing or reading, from the bottom of page 210.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Each act of writing or reading, of making or viewing, of acting or directing, is an act of reaching out to another point in the void, a point from which someone is reaching out to you. The mutual reaching represents an extraordinary collusion across time and space, a combined act of radical faith. In the availability of one human experience to another human experience, in the twin desires to know and be known, I find a new kind of hope, somehow both risk and blessing. Maybe then the happy ending is not what creates hope or defines hopeful art. It is in each moment of potential encounter along the path, and how available we are willing to be, again and again, to the idea that something might be generated there.
Thank you. Ruth is also reaching out to you from through the void with her cat toy. Thank you. And for everyone who's been tuning in, we are reaching out to you. And I want to thank Megan Sanderg-Zakian once again for being my guest for this week's Happiness Hour.
Thank you for having me.
And just to make a couple plugs, you can learn more about Megan at her website, which is www.megansz.com. Megan's book, once again, There Must Be Happy Endings, which is published by The Third Thing Press, is available at spdbooks.com. That's small press distribution. Or you can see if your local bookstore has it and support your local small businesses that way. I want to say a special thanks to Scott Polkowski, our guest services manager, for making the happy ending cocktail, to Jen Lyons, our director of production, Andrew Wilhelm, our sound supervisor, and now video editor, sound editor extraordinaire, to Megan, of course, and to all of you tuning in, stay safe, stay healthy, stay hopeful. And tune in again next week for another round of Geva's Happiness Hour. Thanks so much.